Paper Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and with me, as always, is the Honorable J.P. Marzullo.
Hi, Josh.
JP?
How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I'm doing good, actually. That's cool for a change. You know, I still have my flannel shirts ready because it's supposed to drop pretty extensively.
It's supposed to be like 70, high 70s, 80s in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I know, but today was in the 60s. They said it was going to be in the 70s.
Yeah.
They got that dartboard where
So
they
they're
just
wrong.
throw. So I do have some news, though. The Cubbies, the Cubs clinched a spot in the playoff today.
Oh.
So Donna's ecstatic, and I promised her I would show the Cubbies hat, so there it is, and I'm good. She'll probably have dessert for me now, so just have to do it that way.
All right. We have a good friend of the show. Our guest tonight is Jeff Chidester. How you doing?
Good.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey.
And it's Constitution Day, by the way. I forgot to mention that.
I've got a conspiracy theory for you,
Oh,
Jeff.
nice. Excellent.
Cool. He has some great ones,
tell
though,
me
that
what you think about
aren't
this.
always
So-
conspiracies.
Yeah.
Just over a year ago, there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life,
Yeah.
and within
On Melania?
uh,
On his wife, you said? Or
No, on Donald Trump's
his life.
life.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and about a week or two later, you were our guest on the show, and we talked about executive protection
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And last week there was another assassination, and here you are again.
I know.
I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not sure I'm going to invite you back.
No. Well, no. I mean, once
we
again,
don't schedule people too far out, only a
No.
couple of weeks ahead. But every time we schedule you, something
There's
really
something.
bad happens.
it is interesting when you think about things like that because from my past career in protective services, so I did get a couple calls last week if I would be a guest.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, out of last week, I was too sensitive. I didn't really want to be a guest. I was
Yeah.
having a hard time with my own show. So,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
how about that?
That's an extra one.
Well, anyway, that's not why you're here.
Okay.
We're here because
Excellent.
it's like JP says, it's Constitution Day. We're going to talk about the Constitution, and it actually plays a little bit into what happened last week because
Right.
we're talking about
Free speech.
the biggest pieces of the Constitution are the rights that are guaranteed to us as citizens, the Bill of Rights, and the number one item there has been under attack for quite a while, and it came to a head last week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think once again, how long has this been going on? And over decades, we've
Yeah.
seen. Today we mark the anniversary of the signing of the Constitution, and one of the things is that mandated by law, every school in the country that receives any federal funds in any way is required to set time aside on September 17th to teach the Constitution. Now, when you and I went to school, right, the Constitution was taught every day.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have to put a special day aside. I mean, I had a whole semester on the Declaration of Independence, and I had a whole semester on the Constitution. Of course, the history around all of that, but that
Right.
was always the center part. But one of the problems is that when you look at things like the First Amendment, how many people misunderstand it, don't understand it, don't realize that the state of New Hampshire has two
Yes.
provisions in our state constitution further protecting our right to speech. And they really do have not only a sense of why it was the First Amendment and why it was important to our founding fathers and why it is the envy of the world. But now they've gone so far as to say we don't even care about it anymore.
Right.
If we're up against somebody who is speaking in opposition to something we believe in, then we don't want them to speak anymore. And there's the danger part.
Right. So let's go ahead and put that graphic up, and we will read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, a lot of people will take that and say, oh, freedom of speech, I can say whatever I want. But there are nuances to it that have to be a part of it, right?
Right.
You can have the freedom of speech, but it does not cover libel and slander.
Correct.
You can't just outright lie and expect that you're not going to get consequences. You
Correct.
can't slander and expect that there won't be consequences. Now, you can say whatever you want and you won't be charged by the government, right? You won't go to jail for it, but it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for the evil, horrible things that you say.
Right. Well, absolutely. And I think once again, our founding fathers were pretty clear with this. You can look at Thomas Jefferson. You can look at Madison. They all said, with this liberty, this freedom, there is a responsibility. They knew that when we look at libel laws and we look at some of the other laws that are put in place about the mischievous points of how people communicate, and that's the nicest way I can say it. But really, it's malice. When you look at how they would talk about what we see in the news right now, and what we see in current events, our founding fathers knew that potential could be there, but they wanted to protect it as much as they can. But they also knew that factual was the important part of the First Amendment. But as I said, people not understanding the debate that was going on. I have these two big volume books of the actual debate of the Constitution, and so a lot of
Federalists and the Anti-Federalist papers.
all of them going back, and they had a scribe, and they were writing down all the notes, and when this one came up, this was the shortest debate. The First Amendment was the shortest debate. It was on there.
Everybody can agree that
Okay.
we want to be able to say what's on our mind. You need to be able to call out the government because they've just gone through that.
Correct.
That was the entire purpose of the war that they had just come out of.
Yeah, and they understood all of it too, and the part of the debate that was going on, and when they were having the conversation, they brought up flags, and they talked about how they would burn the Union Jack and they would desecrate the Union Jack, and they said yes, that's protected. They talked about pamphlets. They were particularly concerned with some of the pamphlets that had gone out and helped the revolution. Many which were generated in Pennsylvania, Boston, and even up in New Hampshire. They said no. They understood when they were having the debate that this is the extension of speech. That speech comes in many forms and is delivered many different ways.
And that's why they tried to put as many examples up there as they could.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom of speech, freedom of the press,
Right.
all of those things. They want, and we recognize that the freedom of speech is not limited to just verbatim what was in the amendment.
Right.
It now extends to media. It now extends to television and social media. And so we don't restrict ourselves to what was just in the First Amendment.
Right.
And we all believe that, and we all understand that, and the liberals understand that, but for some reason, the liberals don't understand that concept when it applies to the Second Amendment, right? We don't just restrict it to what was available and known to the writers at the time, right? Newer and different types of arms are still covered under the Second Amendment, but that's not what we're talking about right now. I'm just saying that there's, like you said, they understood that it came in many forms, and they tried to cover it as broadly as possible, and they did so across all of the rights that they granted us.
Your liberties were not limited by the technology that was going to come later on. They understood that. And within their own life, they've seen what would happen with how presses were being able to advance and be able to mass produce literature much quickly. They understood that more people were moving into closer to the cities. So when you did speak on the soapbox, because that's what it was the soapbox, and you spoke, you could get a rather large crowd. And we see this in Boston, New York, Charlestown, just all over the place. That's what they understood the First Amendment to really protect.
So we've kind of come full circle with that now, though. I mean, everybody says that we had the freedom to do and to say what we wanted. But if violence is attached to that, there has to be some...
that's where the limits are.
Right. That's not stated in the Constitution, though, and that's why people will argue with you about that point.
Well,
right? Or not?
They will argue with you on that point, but you do have the freedom of speech and the freedom of thought, right? Because here we are. What's happened is someone has been killed for what is essentially a thought crime, for what the other side was thinking that was going on, and they weren't actually listening to the words that he was speaking.
Right.
But there are still other laws that we have to abide by, right? Laws
Sure.
against murder and violence and things like
Right.
that.
Right.
And when you start advocating for breaking the law, now you're getting into all kinds of other things. If I even just mention the idea of wanting to kill somebody in social media or on television, especially if it was a politician, the law enforcement would be down on my butt faster than you can speak.
Correct.
Right? So you cannot say things and you cannot advocate for things that are illegal.
Right. I mean, early on, after the Constitution was signed, we started to see an incitement laws come about. There was an understanding that violence was not going to be the first preferred method. We saw that with the Declaration of Independence. We will go to a point and talk as much as we can, and then we knew that the line had been reached. So incitement laws and certainly just simple things like behavior in public, those laws came out in many different communities. So we know that violence is not the extension of speech that they were protecting, and they were pretty clear on that. But the problem is that, like you said, what we've seen over the last week is much of the conversation around the First Amendment isn't really the actions of the government right now. It's the action of the civilian entities. It's the press. It's the social media outlets that are actually promoting or allowing this kind of language to go on. It's private companies. It's schools. They're coming out and saying.
But there are some violations here, right?
Yeah.
Again, you've got the press. You've got major mainstream media pretending that they don't know what the motive was.
Right.
Pretending that they don't have the answers,
Correct.
right? And they are outright lies, right? And in some cases, they're saying that this shooter was a hardcore MAGA Republican, and apparently only 8% of Democrats actually understand that that's not the case,
Right.
Right? But then you have actual text messages, you have actual interviews with his mother, actual interviews with his family members, brother-in-law, and roommates, to the contrary, right? And you still have media outlets out there explicitly, maliciously spreading a lie about this shooter and his intentions, and they're praising him. CBS, one of the CBS folks was actually saying that the text messages to his transgender lover were very touching.
Touching, right. I think you heard that, and I think once again, when we get into speech,
this type of behavior from the media is not what was meant to be protected.
No, I think it goes so far, and it's a challenge, and we say it all the time. We hear many people, especially here in New Hampshire, where government is our sport. We don't have a major sports
Right.
team. Government and being involved in the political process, we know it inside and out, and that's why, we've always been a very vocal state, and I think that's really important. And to your point, and I've said before, 2026 and 2028, 2026 are going to be battlegrounds in this state. We know 2028 is going to be the first nation primary. The Democrats will participate in it. But we as a state, we as Granite Staters have one further obligation outside of the candidates. We need to hold the media accountable. And I've said over and over again, we need to start showing up there with signs. We need to start saying that soldiers died defending this, so you would live up to the responsibilities of being the watchdog, being the bullies, being nonpartisan,
And not just the mouthpiece.
and not just the mouthpiece. And if you're incapable of doing that, get out of the way, because right now we know statistically 80% is what they say. We know it's higher of journalists are Democrats. They vote Democrat, and if you think about it, you're the defenders of the First Amendment. You're the defenders of the Constitution. We are as well, but you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be the one that have that access and be able to report on it quickly when these violations to these articles happen. And if you are a Democrat, and Democrats are the ones making most of the mistakes right now, how likely are you to report on something that you supported? Because how does that make you look?
Yeah, I mean, there's two. I'm thinking of Fennerman now. He's come completely around on this. And that's one person.
He just strikes me as just a reasonable Democrat, someone who's at least willing to listen and understand what's going on around him. Again, we're getting back to the old days when you could have reasonable conversations before the media is instilling this division amongst us.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have a lot more gray area between the parties.
Yes.
And now there's this very sharp line that divides us, and we're supposed to hate each other. And Fetterman, he harkens back to someone who's reasonable and at least you can work with.
Yeah, and then there's Harold Ford,
Right.
who is a congressman, and he's on, on the 5.
Yeah.
And I listened to him on the way in, and he's in totally agreement with this is really a problem. We need to stop it now. And he said it's got to be stopped now. He said, but the tough part is to get people to talk to each other, which is exactly what Charlie was trying to do. Is come on, prove me wrong. I loved that statement actually, because he was bright enough to be able to answer most of those questions.
And you would think that after witnessing what was
Horrific.
We've all seen the video, all right, the close-up video, and it's they doing their best to not circulate it anymore.
Yeah.
But after witnessing that, everybody around the world has seen it.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that everybody on both sides would say, okay, we got to cut it. We can't celebrate this. We can't advocate this. We have to cut it out because next time it may not be on that side. It may be on this side.
Correct.
Right? Because Charlie Kirk was the embodiment of free speech, and we're all exercising it, which means we are all a target.
Right, but he is also, I hope someone out there really puts down technology and collects all of his speeches that are available, labels them by topic, because I think they're going to be a lesson for decades. He not only was the embodiment of free speech, he showed the responsible side of free speech, to go out there and give people the opportunity to counter the argument. He wasn't
just in an echo chamber. He invited everyone of all sides and talk to me and convince me otherwise. And there are moments, I've seen moments where he says, you know what? I'm going to come a little bit over to your side on this one.
And we saw moments also, Josh,
seen
that
him
they came over to him.
Yes, we've seen it.
They all started hostile.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, we had Lisa Mazer on, and she had just been hired by Turning Point. Yeah, and so she took that pretty tough, as we all did. But they also now have started. She went and spoke with a group of people at St. Anselm's, and they had a conversation. And when she left and got home, she told me that she had gotten an email from one of the students who was, kind of pushing back a little bit. And the person said, we're going to start a Turning Point committee here, which I thought was fabulous.
Right.
But I've thought about who could pick up that torch now. I mean, I don't know. And I knew a little bit about Charlie Kirk, but I went through, and as you did, I'm sure you did as well, and listened to some of those debates where people were saying, that he's a racist, that he's, all of these terrible things, and he wasn't. All you have to do is watch one of them.
Yeah. Instead, folks were listening to what they heard about him, and that just got worse and worse and worse, which each iteration of gossip, and to the point where Stephen King says that Charlie Kirk was advocating the stoning of gays.
Yeah.
Right.
But that conversation, I watched that conversation in its entirety. He was responding to Miss Rachel. And Miss Rachel was quoting the Bible, and she was quoting Leviticus 19 about love thy neighbor.
Yeah.
And Charlie Kirk said, that's great, but you're cherry picking because you just quoted Leviticus 19, but literally the previous paragraph, Leviticus 18, says that we should be stoning gays.
Right.
And so you can't just arbitrarily quote the Bible and expect that that's going to alleviate any responsibility you have towards whatever things you've said in the past. But he was making the point that both sides were cherry picking out of the Bible,
Yeah,
and that she literally skipped over a sentence in order to make her point about Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Right, but and that's a really good point too, Josh, because I think that's one of the things that we're seeing is that one of the reasons why we're having this difficult conversation about the First Amendment is because people are walking away from their responsibilities to the totality of the conversation. Even in disagreement, it's important for you to know the other side very well, to be intimately knowledgeable on the positions
Absolutely.
they have. And we've lost that a little bit because a lot of schools don't even have debate teams anymore.
Right.
And
That's true.
there's really three big factors to why we see this. The first one is the institutions of education who are to be the propagators to make sure you have the opportunity to speak openly from every position. You're blessed because New England College, having been to those classrooms and having seen, Dr. Wayne would never let anything.
No.
They seem to be doing it well, but not all college campuses are. Teachers need to take a step back and say, what is my responsibility in this classroom if the expression of speech is part of the curriculum? And they really need to take that to heart. I think the second point, and you did this really well, Josh, about the media needs to take that step back and say, we are protected by a covenant in which people died to ensure that it could exist. That we need to take this responsible. And I find it funny that when you look at how people criticize Fox or even Newsmax, they have some of the best journalists out there. Brett Baer's show is better than any 6 o'clock show.
I agree.
And News Nation is getting up there as well. And I think that's the second covenant that really has to be protected as well. And then the last one is what we're seeing with Turning Point. We are now seeing a group of young people, much like what I saw in 1977 with those who came to Ronald Reagan with the first CPAC. They have now been charged, and they feel that it's now their responsibility to carry on what Charlie started. Each of these other two entities, should they decide not to step up to the plate, should they not decide to reconnect themselves to what their purpose was, to educate with open minds and let all opinions be spoken correctly, to present only the facts and let a smart and well-informed public embrace it, this next generation, and I've said that over the last couple of weeks, over the next 10 years, we're going to see them hold these other two entities accountable, and they better catch up pretty quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, the name of the organization is perfect.
Yeah,
Turning Point.
I know.
I mean, it is perfect in many different ways. Is Charlie Kirk the turning point? I mean, they were saying, we're all saying that that's a turning, but the turning point is really what you just said. It's this next generation that is starting to understand, and make those waves, those inroads.
Well, because you and I come from Reagan, and
Right.
I talk about the 3 times I met Ronald Reagan, and at 13 I became a conservative because I met Ronald Reagan and how he interacted. I was in an audience and watched how he interacted with the group and how he gravitated towards the young people. Yeah. And then how he spent the time from losing 1976 until the next election. Every night he was on. He had his own little radio segment,
and he kept it through the White House.
But when the young Republicans were trying to put together an organization, and they ended up doing, because CPAC is really the fundraiser for that organization.
Right.
He was the first one to speak. If you want to know the early version of Charlie Kirk, you want to read Reagan's 1977 CPAC speech. Because you can see the tenets of what Charlie tried to convey over and over again. And what's refreshing for all of us is I see it so much in all these Turning Point young people.
Yeah.
They're getting smarter, they're learning how to debate better, and now they feel that they have a responsibility to hold people accountable. And
they're speaking to it.
And I've seen a lot of them. We've seen a lot of them being interviewed in the media over the last week. These very young teenagers who have their own podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
And there's dozens of them. They're all out there, and they are incredibly smart. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, I wish I was that smart at that age, right? But and I probably was, but I didn't have the internet. I didn't have the ability.
You didn't have a Charlie
to do that, right?
Well, I mean, it's about hope, right?
Yeah.
And now I have hope that the next generation is starting to pull it together now. But I grew up in the 60s. I saw all the assassinations.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw how it worked. Martin Luther King had, kind of made peace with most of his people. And he was a Republican, as it turns out. But the point I'm making is that he kind of calmed everything down at that time because things were getting a little crazy. I mean, JFK was assassinated, and then Bobby. Oh, Martin Luther King, I think, before Bobby.
Correct.
But the point is, it gives you this empty feeling about this, and you wonder, I've always thought and looked back and said, what if JFK had lived? Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be a whole different...
Well, that was it. All of those assassinations in the 60s were of individuals who were trying to get back to the norm. They were individuals who were pushing back against the deep state, which we have to, knowing what we know today, we have to say that the deep state began its run way back then.
Yeah.
Right. And just got stronger and stronger as time went on. Yeah. But every single one of them was pushing back against the deep state, and
were eliminated.
They could not be dealt with on the debate stage, so they had to be eliminated.
Well, and each of them too, I think, you can look at particularly RFK and certainly Martin Luther King. They lived the mantra my dad used to talk about. He goes, if you're not in the room, you're on the menu. If you're not willing to go in and talk to people,
that's a great comment.
Then you're going to be talked about. So you know how to control that. And you saw this twist. You saw it with Robert Kennedy, particularly when Martin Luther King was killed. He was more willing to really listen to people. Martin Luther King at that point, the months leading up to what happened in Memphis, he was starting to meet with other people. He was. And he was meeting with police officers in these cities, and their chiefs didn't know it. So you saw more of that. And this movement away, especially when you look at the First Amendment, we've been given this gift, and we've squandered it. And I think shows like this are important. I think a lot of other shows that are out there. I think social media has been the absolute opposite of something that helped the First Amendment flourish. You get these keyboard warriors who would never say, Josh.
Oh, they would never.
Right there, they would never say to your face. But when they're at that keyboard, they say, and that's another thing that parents and schools can look at and say, like my mom used to say, bite your bottom lip before you speak if you think you're going to say something terrible. Because 2 reasons you want to do that. One, you feel that little bit of pain. That's only a minutiae of what you'll feel if you say something stupid. And it'll give you a chance to think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we need to start teaching that more. We need more debate clubs. We need to go in there and say, if you have a different political opinion than anyone else in this room, and you will never know my political opinion as a teacher.
Right.
Say it. You'll never be fair. We need to see more people like New England College. Let their professors loose and teach more of those things.
You make a good point about the keyboard warriors. And if I'm honest, I think we're all guilty of it at some point, right? I don't tend to engage in political type discussions online. Yeah. But I will bait somebody, right? I will say something sarcastic.
Oh no, not you,
right? I will certainly troll somebody, but I won't let it devolve, right? I won't. Right. I'll just step away from it. But it's something we have to teach is some of that restraint to the younger generation. That if you're not willing to say it face to face, don't put it in writing. Because that will come back to haunt you in 10 or 15 years.
Yes.
Once it's written down, it's forever.
Yes.
It's forever. You can go back and delete it and unsend, and you can do all of these things, but it is forever. It is out there, period. And I don't think people realize this, and they think they can hide. They think they can make their profiles private. It's not a saving grace to make your profile private or start deleting things. We see it all the time. Every time something like this happens, we start seeing posts get deleted. No, it's too late. You already said those things. And and there are consequences. There may not be legal consequences.
Correct.
But there are going to be social media consequences. You can be banned for violating, community rules.
Probably and all of us here at one time.
There can be,
but for the wrong reasons.
Right, and there can be job issues.
Oh yeah.
So we're seeing the count. The last time somebody's keeping a track. There's a website. The count of the number of people who have lost their jobs for advocating for the murder of Charlie Kirk in the last 7 days, because we're now 1 week. It was 1 week ago today. Yep. The last time I saw it, I think it was sometime yesterday. It was up to 600 plus people around the country who are either losing their jobs or being forced to resign because they're saying just vile things. And these vile things are not what we want you to teach our children.
Correct.
And I'm not comfortable going and seeing a neurosurgeon who says these things.
Correct.
If you're willing to advocate for the death of somebody else that you don't disagree with, I don't want you operating on my spine.
Because you might see the red hat.
Right.
I mean, and there is that fear. I mean, we have over 100 teachers in Texas right now who are not only losing their jobs, but losing their certifications.
Yes.
And
Yes, Texas has gone as far as to decertify them, not just fire them.
And I saw one of the people, and you know, we all want to believe in, you know, the ability to overcome our mistakes. And I saw one person get on there, and I appreciate her retraction and her apology. The mistake she made, though, was this. She said, I made a mistake. No, you didn't make a mistake. You consciously sat down, wrote it out. In her case, she did grammar check and spell check, too. So kudos to
You
her.
let the world
But
know exactly what was going on inside your brain.
And you had that moment second, that little send button, that little send arrow. You had a chance where you can say, this is just something I felt like I'm going to remove it, and we will speak of it nevermore. And you sent it. That's not a mistake. Right, that is a conscious decision, and for some reason, you know, when we talk about the First Amendment, we miss that the conscious decision. We know there are repercussions, and sometimes those repercussions are worth it. Sometimes standing up in, especially the free government, you know you potentially could lose your job. You know something, but you walk away knowing that this is what our founding fathers did. I don't think a lot of these people think that what they said and what they did and how they did it was worth losing their job. And if you come to that realization, then you know that you didn't approach the gift of your free speech with a conscience and a responsibility. You didn't. But if you walk away and say,
perfectly said.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I always heard, you know, you can't yell fire in a movie theater, right? I mean, that's one of the things you heard all the time.
That's the lie. That's the slander, the libel.
Exactly.
You cannot expect that is considered free speech because that has consequences.
Right.
People getting up, trampling each other to get out because there's not really a danger.
And you know, we know a lot of different people are watching the show. And we hope that younger people are watching the show too. This, right, the opportunity we have to talk to each other. We're not looking at our phones. Right. I don't think a lot of people realize that when they watch Charlie Kirk and he was in there may have been people taking pictures, but for the 3 hours, which are some of these things, for 3 hours, you're talking about people who have not been given an opportunity to have a conversation more than 10 minutes face to face with anyone, have to extend that conversation. That was the other brilliant part. And I think, you know, we missed that. And I know you guys all agree with me that there were times when we sat at a table when we were younger and we had people with different opinions, and we actually debated those, and we got up at the end and we liked each other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my family did that. You know, so debate people in your family and end up with a glass of wine at the end.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
I mean,
so I had a tradition. So me and a college buddy of mine, Marcus, were complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right?
politically.
Right. But we'd go hiking, camping, drink beer, go fishing, all of these things together, snowmobiling, and we had an agreement. We're not going to discuss those types of things because it will ruin us. But on election night, every 4 years, we will sit together, each of us with a case of beer and a map, right? And as the returns come in, we will mark it off, and that was our one night.
Are you still doing
that we would do that.
That's really cool.
We're not still doing that, but
that's great.
We
It's a great
would
idea.
do that on election night.
Yeah, if you lose a state, you had to drink.
Right. I don't remember
Very
the
Canadian
details,
approach to elections.
But the point is that you don't have to hate people of different opinions. There are still so many things that bring us together. Primarily, we're Americans.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that we have the freedom to have opposite opinions is what brings us together. And so, you know, I have plenty of friends of that nature, but we're told that you're not allowed to do that anymore.
Right. Well, part of the problem is, like I said, you know, the new rules for debating. There's safe zones in debate clubs now.
Oh, geez.
And how many times, when you were in debate, oftentimes, and I think the teacher always knew this, where you stood on certain positions, and your team always got the position you wish you didn't have to defend.
Right, exactly.
And that made you a better person, because once again, you had to understand that how you were going to debate this had to come from intellect, not emotion.
Right.
It had to come from research, and not flipping through the pages that send you the message you like. And you had to go in there and be prepared to defend that position, even though you were in opposition.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore either. I mean, the Charlie Kirk's brilliance, and somebody heard me say this, is, he used the Socratic method,
Yep.
which is lost in all of our schools now.
Ask a question.
Yep, Socrates bringing that in and constantly ask questions over and over again.
You answer a question with a question.
And you keep going with that, and
Yep.
it reveals so much. I did notice, and this is, I hope more people watch his videos, I started to notice more people in opposition to him were using that method, and you could see he was enjoying the conversation.
Yeah,
That he understood, that people now understood why he was doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he turned a lot of people, but that's not publicized, right? Over the last week, I've seen plenty of TikTok and social media and plenty of coverage of people who were firmly, violently opposed to anything that Charlie Kirk had to say, but came around.
Yeah.
Right. One that I watched today was a black gentleman. He went researching. He went and he tried to find video of Charlie Kirk's speeches where Charlie Kirk is racist, and he came out and said, "No, I don't get it." And he showed video of Charlie Kirk telling this mom that her baby was beautiful, and them having a really great. And the fellow says, he says, "You don't turn off racism." I don't see that in him. I haven't seen a single video of him being racist, but I've seen hundreds of videos of him being gracious to everybody that had an opposite opinion. And I just don't believe that people can turn off racism that way. You can't turn it off.
No.
And so, but I've seen plenty of videos of folks like this and testimony from folks saying, yeah, what you're hearing about Charlie Kirk is not true, but you have to do your own research. And we've said that 100 times on this show.
Yep.
Don't trust me. I know I'm right, but it's still up to you to go and find out and do your own research.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, too. A lot of people approach that research, if they're in opposition to what you just said, Josh. They'll say, they'll type in the characteristics to prove Josh wrong.
Right.
And what I always tell people is, don't do that. Type in the characteristics to prove Josh right. Because if he isn't right, that will reveal to you more honestly than you just trying to find out wrong. And that's where most people are now starting that litany of the list that I saw in the meme about what Charlie said. And people started researching, go, well, wait a minute. Here's the bigger context of the conversation.
Yes.
Well, wait a minute. I clicked that link, and that quote isn't even in any of the audio you're providing.
Right.
They're hoping you don't do your homework.
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
amazing thing. They hope you don't.
And when you read a quote, you'll see a few words here, ... and then a few more words.
Yada,
and what
yada,
you got to go and figure out is, what did they yada yada yada?
Right. With the ...
and it's usually 2 paragraphs.
Right. There's a huge bit of context in between there. So
I think, I've appreciated this conversation, but, one of the things I have noticed, and this is where we end up getting into ideology, I believe right now, and has been for quite some time, people more conservative-minded are better at debate, better at willing to want to have the debate and the conversation, and don't take it personally. And we see this all the time on conservative-themed shows. They're much better at that, and it's the left that keeps pulling further and further away even to have that, which makes it very frustrating, especially now when what we're debating is, you really believe you don't know what the motive is?
Right.
Right.
And then we've seen this 100 times, and I won't even bother to even try to name any of them. But a liberal gets asked a question by the media, and they're like, "Oh, that's crap," or they ignore it, or they have no interest in having a discussion on the matter because they know that they don't have the high ground here. They know, right? And even if they did, they're not capable of articulating it.
And the media lets them get away with it. And I think when we look at this thing too, I couldn't help but look at this, abridge the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably assembly. And one of the things that we don't see in our own state, when was the last time you saw any of our federal delegation peaceably assemble and invite the constituents, invite their employers to come and talk? When was the last time you saw it, JP? We've been at this, and Josh, when was the last time? And that's the First Amendment. They're supposed to be participants in this First Amendment process.
We've repeated this a few times over this season where we're getting people jumping into the CD1 and CD2. When was the last time we saw Chris Pappas do that?
Yeah.
We don't see it, and we don't even hear from him until it's election season.
And even then, right now he's in the mindset. He's looking at the numbers, and unless he feels threatened, he's not going to have these interviews. He's not going to do these town halls.
Right.
Congresswoman Goodlander.
What's the saying? It says, better to keep your mouth shut than to open it and remove all doubt.
But
right?
Congresswoman Goodlander had a town hall 3 weeks ago that was closed, that only went to people on her mailing list that they verified, and someone from Turning Point made it in there. And started the video, and was going to ask a question, really polite gentleman, and they asked him to be removed. And the police officer went up there. Now I'll have another conversation about police officers and when they should be doing certain things. But one of the things that came up is that this was not a town hall, it was a private event. And so,
but he had an invitation to this private event.
But she had billed it as a town hall. Her video said, I was at a town hall, and you and I have seen these town halls.
Yes.
Frank Ginta was brilliant at this. Come to my town hall, fill out the questions. We're not going to and we'll randomly pick there. And he'd sit there for hours answering questions.
Oh yeah,
from everybody. I've seen him get yelled at, and just go ahead, and then he would say, okay, this is how we're going to look at it. So I think that once again, when we look at that First Amendment, I don't like to be lectured by, especially politicians, when they don't realize the First Amendment is a guideline for them to peacefully assemble and participate in this process. And when you choose not to do that, part of the frustration you're seeing across the country is because of that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, and I try not to do this, I was actually angry for the last week when I saw some of the things that people had actually put on Facebook. Now, and then I got to the point where I was so angry that I just scrolled by them. I said, I've listened, I've read it. I can't.
You do the first two or three, and then you're like, okay, they're all the same. They're all wackadoos.
Yeah, what I love to do then is look at their profile. 3 people from Canada, 4 from South Africa, and so they're making comments about him and our country. Now I have a fellow that I've never met personally. You all know I used to wear bow ties, right?
Yeah.
So I was online, and a British fellow named James Virgo, who's a artisan basically, and I started talking, and he sent me a bow tie out of bronze. He made it out of bronze.
Wow.
It was really cool. Yesterday, scrolling through, I saw his name. It said, you know how you go down, you see who looked at your site or something, James Ferguson. I clicked it on, and he said, we're praying for the United States of what happened, and we're behind you. And that really touched me, because I've never met him. We've only been, doing that kind of thing. He's invited me over there in England, and I've said, when you come to the States, come and see me. But that can happen. I mean, I don't know what his political, where he is politically. I know nothing about that.
Right.
But the fact that he said that they're praying for the United States really hit home.
I think it's as liberal as foreign media is. I think they're not as ingrained or entrenched in the liberal mindset or the liberal agenda as our own media is.
Yeah.
So I've seen some biased foreign media, but for the most part, they try to be as fair as possible.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially the British.
Yep.
And I think that probably explains why we had the what was it Robinson's march in London Saturday.
The big one. Million people.
It was huge.
It was 1 million people.
Yep.
And they had a moment of silence and a vigil for Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
And I think they see over there, they see more clearer through our media crap than our own people see through it. I think they understand, and they're under attack too.
Sure.
Their government and their politicians are being replaced with a particular single mindset, and they're in trouble too.
Yeah, they don't have a First Amendment,
and they don't have a First Amendment.
And, you know,
people are going to jail for what they said on Twitter.
Yes.
Right? These people here, you're losing your jobs, but you're not going to jail for saying these horrible things about Charlie Kirk. You say that in England about a politician or an influence, you'll go to jail.
I came to the realization this morning that if Don Rickles was still alive, Don Rickles, he would literally be able not to go anywhere. But he picked on everybody. But I mean, we'd see BBC go, Don Rickles has been banned from England, simply because he understood that, you know, once again, you spread the wealth. But you brought up another really good point too, Josh, that I think that when you talk about the media, many in the media, there's three things that's really affecting the corporate media right now. One, they don't realize that they're biased. They don't realize they're biased because they're isolated in their little silo.
They're in an echo chamber.
We know this to be true. The second thing, you know, when you look at just how the corporate media functions, what was funny, and we'll take Washington, D.C. as an example, when they decided to send people out and put cameras in front of the Washington, D.C. residents, they were convinced, the media was convinced. Mm-hmm. You don't want these people in your town. You don't want, and almost to a T. And you could just see the face. They would come back and go, back to you, John. and so the media is the second mistake. The media is they're not getting out away from their comfort zone and not getting into these communities. They tried the same thing in Memphis.
They don't have to. They're literally talking heads. They've got their six-figure salaries, and they don't want to. They don't want to challenge that, right? This is not the Bob Woodward days where you're going out and you're doing real journalism, investigative journalism, and finding out the truth and then reporting the truth regardless of what your producer wants you to say. Right? That's what needs to happen. And I've said this before. I said if any one of these liberal media talking heads wants to win the Pulitzer Prize and put that on your resume, tell the truth.
Yeah, it would but what that means too is that, you know, and I'm not, you know, once again, I want to make sure how I say this carefully, that, you know, when the media starts coming back into New Hampshire for 2028, and they will, we need to force them out of the comfort zone. We need to be in the diners, and when they stick the microphone in our face, go, can you explain to me why you've spent 1,600 hours on Epstein, and I didn't hear anything about that.
Right.
That's right.
So I appreciate you asking me what my opinion is. My opinion is right now you're not worth the First Amendment and the lives that were lost for what you did. And I think more New Hampshireites need to do that. Granite staters across the board. We need to show up when they rent these little rooms and do their little, and hold the signs up of all the things they didn't report or all the things they lied about.
Right.
Hey, Katie, what about this? You said this, you said this. I think that's what the election should be about in 2028. We can deal with the candidates, but let's really put the media in their place.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
All right. I'll get the signs ready.
Okay.
No, that is going to be my intention.
Well, no, we're in the perfect spot to do it because we are the first in the nation primary.
Yep.
So everybody's going to be here. All the candidates and all the news outlets are going to be here. And they can't pixelate every single sign we create.
No, they take over. I don't know how many cameramen I've had walk over me. I had one cameraman push my son. He wanted to get a picture of Trump. And we were just standing and he pushed it in, and I grabbed the cord of his camera and yanked it back. And he goes, hey, what are you doing? I said, just knock this kid over. He goes, well, I'm trying to do a story. I go, no, what you're trying to do is get your picture with Trump up on the media. You're not doing a story.
Right.
You're doing the clickbait that you need. Don't run over kids.
You know, I think if nothing else, we've kind of discussed what the First Amendment really means and what it should mean without coming to a conclusion about how it's going to be perceived by the left or the media. I mean, it's pretty clear what it says. But they'll use the same argument that, well, it's free speech. Well, it is, but there are consequences for that free speech. And that's something I think they've lost. I really do. I think they've lost that intellect that really describes what it is and how it ought to be handled. I don't know how we do that. I guess through education, obviously. But they don't even talk about the Constitution in schools. Very seldom.
They don't talk about the Constitution. It's sad. And I remember Mrs. Johnson, my 8th grade teacher, crying when she read it. And she cried not because she was having a bad day, but she felt passionate about what our founding fathers gave us. She looked at it as a gift. She looked at it as a gift every day. We have to get back to that. As I said, I've been in light contact with New England College to actually get people of different opinions and start sitting up on a stage and going in there respectfully and walking through maybe some of the harder conversations that you're going to want to have. But once again, film it and teach people once again how to respect the First Amendment and how to respect the other people that you're conversing with. I think that's we have to start from scratch, JP. Can you believe it? We have to go back and just admit that the color of paint that we put on the wall isn't working.
Yeah.
Just scrape it all down and say. But I have hope, especially with what I see from Turning Point, because I think people who aren't even conservative are joining Turning Point. I think that they're sick of not being able to have a conversation. So I have hope that might be the catalyst.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, that's very important.
And bring a few of them on here. I mean, I think that's the fun part too. I mean, some of the joy of education has always been when you walked into a room and you were challenged. And that's why I think a lot of kids are aggravated about education now. They're not being challenged.
Right.
And conversation is a challenge.
Yeah. I remember having those types of debates in Mr. Dyer's history class, and there were very few folks who would agree with my style of conservatism at the time, but I had the debate anyway with folks that were just complete polar opposites, and of course I was still a teenager, right? I mean, so we weren't getting into really heavy subject. We were getting into debates over what was happening in the history books. One of the big debates was over the real meaning of the Civil War.
Oh yeah,
right?
That's
the Civil War was a shooting war long before the Emancipation Proclamation. Right? That was a tactic of Abraham Lincoln and the Union to force the hand of the Southern combatants. Right, and so we got into debates like that, and one girl was just polar opposite. She was always the one to stand up and challenge me. She was on the opposite side of darn near every issue. And so now we're talking 35 years ago, 40 years ago. Her and I are Facebook friends. And guess what?
Today.
She is more conservative than I am. Right? I mean, the debates need to happen. They need to happen at a young age, and they need to get your gears turning so that you can think like an adult when it happens.
Challenge, and you bring up a really good point. I mean, that's always a good debate to have. It really stirs up a lot of different thought processes that make you look at that from many different ways. But it brings up the fact that when we look at the Constitution, we look at the First Amendment, we're a federalist type of government. We were always meant to have these debates closer to our neighbors. And I think one of the problems, and this is kind of the last point I'll probably make, is one of the problems that we're having difficulty with these conversations, why it has been hijacked, why the media has been able to get away with what it's get away with. We have centralized everything. Instead of saying, look, that's not a problem we should be talking about down in Washington, D.C., let's talk about our neighborhood. We are governing from the top up instead of from the bottom up, like we were intended to be. And that means all of our conversations are that way. We've stopped talking as neighbors. And all these conversations should be happening like on shows like this. This should be the most popular show. Not, no offense to Brett Barrett, those should not be the shows we watch because that's far away.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our friends on the other side of the aisle don't tend to accept our invitations.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's clear where our loyalties lie and our values are.
But
I mean, we've tried. I mean, we've had the speaker, the Democrat Speaker of the House on before. We had our previous Secretary of State, a Democrat. We've had a few
Bill
Democrats.
Gardner, yeah.
We've had a few on, and we've had those types of debates, but we don't get a lot of answers to our invitations.
Well, I think they're a little afraid of the name of the show.
Yeah, but they're afraid of the conversation.
Well, they're getting better at handling guns, obviously, for a party that hates them.
Well, but if you look at Ted Cruz, if you look at Rand Paul, they go on all the shows.
Yep.
If they do.
And they're good, and they have to feel comfortable with their thought process. And if you don't feel comfortable to be able to come into the lines then, and as I said, if you're not in the room, you're on the menu, we're going to talk about you anyway. And you guys are always gracious every time I've been here. When I've watched the show, you give people an opportunity to talk. You'll give them the opportunity to talk.
Yeah. Oh, and I've had some disagreements and sometimes vehement disagreements with other conservatives and Republicans on the show, and that may be just the conspiracy theorist in me coming out. It happens,
but those are fun too.
Right,
they are.
The
fun.
other thing, and the thing is that what's funny is when we do have roundtables of people with different opinions, I always end with you were there. I don't end with a political question. I end with something I know is a common. It could be something like, "What's your favorite ice cream?"
Or "Go Navy, beat Army."
Go Army, beat Navy. That's always a good one for me. And
I'll be the tiebreaker.
And we had somebody who was a complete opposite of me on
me
politics,
as well.
but we came to the realization we liked the same ice cream, and we actually had a 2-minute conversation about why we liked the ice cream.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes we forget. I can be adamant and very, very forceful in what my opinions are, but I can also put a few ice cubes in a bourbon glass and talk to you about other stuff.
Right, exactly.
And I don't think, and that's why I say conservatives are better at conversations, because we can do that. We can have the policy debate, and then we can shift and be Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill at 5 o'clock.
You've got to separate those, like the emotion from those things, and just be humans, be Americans, right? We all have a First Amendment right. We have those privileges, but we're not free from the consequences. We're free from any governmental interjection of our opinions, but we're not free from the consequences in the private world. So, thank you, Jeff.
Well said.
It was another great show.
Next time you guys have to come on the radio show, though.
I'd love to come on the radio show.
So let me give you some dates. I'll get
All
you guys
right.
over
Absolutely. We're still looking for someone to come on next week.
We'll find
So I'm
somebody.
sure I'll find someone. I'm trying not to repeat some of the people so close together. Like, I love to have Terry Roy on. He's been on a lot. But like Walter McFarlane, who I met at Jeff's show for the first time.
Great guy.
He's a great guy. We had him on the show. And, but I'd like to see, I want to try to reach out to some other people. I've tried to get Keith Murphy on. You would think he would jump at this.
Yeah.
Can't seem to get through to him.
get some
But
of
if
the
you're
Turning Point
listening,
guys.
or
Yeah.
one of your people are listening, let me know. Well, we've had Lisa Mazer on, and she's locked in with that. So we'll continue doing that kind of stuff. So.
All right.
But thanks a lot for coming. And,
My pleasure.
that was
All right.
fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Go Navy, beat Army.
Army, yeah, you're outnumbered on this one.
We'll see you next week.